Labour has pledged not to increase corporation tax if elected as part of a drive to win business support ahead of the general election.
Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she would cap the tax at 25%, but could cut it to boost competitiveness.
We're joined now by Assistant Editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Are we seeing, Cindy, the birth of the new Labour Party? Not New Labour. I'm not going to use that, although you have talked about Tony Blair this morning. But a new party. Very much changed party.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much clear now that Labour is most likely going to come into government later this year. And as cautious as Keir Starmer is, as much as he wants to manage expectations, the victory line is so close for them. So at the moment, it's just about just about steadying the ship, not doing anything radical, hence the business conference yesterday, to say to people who are not traditionally Labour voters, we're on your side, don't worry about it.
I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? So all these FTSE 100 leaders were there, paid a lot of money to go to that conference. Whether they actually wanted to be there or whether it's actually, as you say, that Labour is most likely to form the next government, and of course that's absolutely vital to those businesses attending. I mentioned earlier, this is very much a Blair moment of 97. It's very much from that playbook. So saying that we're responsible, we're seeing the Labour Party also changing tack on a number of things. £28 billion Green Pledge. So is this about financial prudence, or is this saying, crikey, all those promises we made all those years ago actually need to be reined in if we are to get voted in? Because, as you say, the finishing line, it's just there.
It's within touching distance, and it's just that, David. You know, when you're an opposition party, and when you're in opposition for such a long time as well, 14 years, you don't have the kind of mechanisms of the state to tell you how much overhead there is to spend things. And so you make all these pledges while you're out in the wild, as it were. But when you're coming into government, you need to have another think about those pledges, whether or not they're really affordable. And Labour knows it doesn't want to raise taxes. It wants to spend more money, but it wants to basically say that it wants to borrow to do that. But all of that is tricky politically to say. Hence, the 28 billion is kind of a bit of like a Schrodinger's Green New Deal here. Does it exist? Does it not exist? It depends on who you ask at what time. And so they're having to be more realistic about it. And they want to say, we're the economic adults in the room now, not the Conservative Party, just look at Liz Truss and so on. And they need to make that message persuasive.
We're a long way from Ed Miliband and the speech attacking the corporate predators, but we're not that far away from Rachel Reeves criticising the government for abolishing the cap on bankers' bonuses. And this week, we have had Labour saying...
Absolutely.
They're not going to reinstate it.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, Keir Starmer and possibly Rachel Reeves as well, they're both serious pragmatists, right? Because the finishing line is so close, they will do whatever it takes to get there. And so I actually find it personally a little bit hard, if you look at Keir Starmer's track record, to believe that he's actually going to commit to the things that he's promising at the moment. You know, there are a number of things he's promising.
Well, that's really interesting. In terms of the electorate, I wonder if they're thinking along the same lines as you. But just in terms of the way the Labour Party is sort of changing, and the Conservative Party. So we've heard there may be two budgets before the next election. Then, of course, we're reining back Jeremy Hunt saying, oh, we haven't got quite the same sort of money. That is natural Tory territory, tax cuts before an election and hoping you're going to win.
Yeah, but of course this Prime Minister and this Chancellor, they know that the books don't look good. And so, you know, last year they said, yeah, it'd be great if we could have tax cuts. But as you say, Jeremy Hunt's now kind of wound those back. So how much we actually see by March, I think, is an open question. I think they're going to have to be smart about which tax cuts they go for. So there was talk about inheritance tax cuts, but they've decided that that doesn't look good to the electorate, which I think is probably fair.
So it also doesn't impact that many people, realistically,
well,
does
yeah,
it?
Exactly. But the red meat for the Conservative Party, it does. Not necessarily the grassroots, but certain of the supporters. But yeah, so they have to be smart about it. And Labour is worried that the Conservative Party is setting traps for them in terms of the fiscal rules, in terms of the tax cuts, things like full expensing, which came in the last budget, which Labour now find it hard to roll back because the Conservatives have already promised it. So it's really interesting territory at the moment where the two are playing very strategically, but it doesn't look like it's shifting the polls that much.
Can we talk about an overspend from the Home Office asking for an emergency £2.6 billion because the asylum seeker hotels have cost more than anticipated?
Yeah, so this is quite an incredible story. The Home Office has to kind of come up with a budget, but actually this has come out after the budget has been approved, and this is actually a tenth of the overall hotels budget in any case. It's quite a significant amount of money because of hotel overspend. And coming, I think, this week, as we're having some other pretty controversial and important asylum story news. You know, the attack in Clapham, which you've been covering this morning, as well as the deal with Turkey not going ahead as planned. It does seem like the problem on small boats, we talk about this every single week, is not getting better, and it's just costing the taxpayer more and more money. Now, I personally think the problem is the backlog. You know, if you didn't have to house these people in hotels, if you either gave them a decision yes or no quicker, then you wouldn't have to have this kind of
Think how much
overspend.
that 2.6 billion could be spent to clear the backlog, but instead it's being...
But of course, also, they're very good at losing people. So you're right, there's a massive backlog, but they don't know where half of them have actually gone. So that's another problem. Let's move on and talk about Northern Ireland, because this is a really important story. The fact is, the devolved assembly will sit. What's your take on what the government has actually announced in terms of, as far as I read it, the Green Lane, where goods go from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, basically has been rebranded as a UK internal market lane?
Yeah, a lot of it is symbolic. A lot of it is symbolic to make people a bit happier. As you say, Green Lane to internal markets lane, does it really make a difference? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, clearly for Jeffrey Donaldson, the leader of the DUP, it does make a difference. There are other symbolic things like putting in law the legal status of Northern Ireland. But for some of his critics in the DUP, I think it is still a tough thing to swallow. So today, we're going to have more legal reviews from his critics. And I think things could still move. You know, they're being scheduled for someone to come back tomorrow at 1 p.m. But
so you're saying there's no guarantees?
Well, I think even if they come back tomorrow, as we know from Brexit and Northern Ireland, the story runs on. You know, there's no perfect fix for this, and so there will be critics for this. All of this is a sticking plaster for now.
Cindy, as always, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for rounding up the political week.
Great.